was the sacred guardian sword Yu Shi Huang had used to slash her own throat. So of course, it was a spiritual device for sure, but it was also a weapon. Rongguang said, Yu Shi Huang sure is generous. Otherwise she was doing it on purpose to scare him. Think he'd dare use Yulong? Shilin couldn't contain it anymore. I don't think so. There wasn't any need to be so shrewd. Then he slapped on another talisman to seal Rongguang's mouth. It just so happened that right then, Pei Ming also called out from the distance. Your Highness, Crimson Rain Sword Flower, are you two rested? Time to put the beds away. Let's get on the road. The resting time wasn't that long in the first place, and time passed while they were chatting. The others stayed behind while Shilian, Hua Cheng, and Pei Ming set off. The Rainmaster had a steed and offered to give them a ride to the foot of the Kiln's mountain. Shilian thanked her graciously. That black ox shook and transformed and became 3 times bigger than its previous size, now with room to carry 6 people on its back. Its front legs lowered to the ground, laying its body low, and the Rainmaster mounted, riding at the very front. Pei Ming was next, but he left a large space between the two of them. The last was Shilian and Hua Cheng. Shilian mounted, and that black ox rose to its feet, now incredibly tall in height. Shilian felt that smooth and shiny black coat and was amazed. Lord Rainmaster's steed truly is magical. Sanlam, I think you might have mentioned it before, but how did it come to be again? The black ox spread its 4 hooves and started running, the landscapes on either side quickly disappearing behind, incredibly fast and steady. Hua Cheng was sitting behind Shilian, lightly hugging his waist, as if afraid he might fall. It was the door knocker of one of the side doors at the Temple of Yulong, the Royal Cultivation Hall of Yu Shi. It turns out there was a small custom at the Temple of Yulong. When one saw a golden beast upon the door knocker, one would rub it to add a bit of the aura of life. When devotees visited, what they usually rubbed were mostly dragons, tigers, herons, and other such holy beasts. People didn't typically rub the ox, so it was rather deserted and lonely. Thus, while Yu Shi Huang was cultivating at the Temple of Yulong, every time she went to seek water and passed that door, she would rub the head of that ox. The door knocker soaked in her essence of life, and when the Rainmaster ascended, the ox ascended with her. As for deputies, she appointed no one else. The black ox sped rapidly, and Shilian's body was leaning back slightly from the force, almost like he was sitting in Hua Cheng's embrace. He smiled as he listened. There sure isn't anything San Lang doesn't know. It's like no tales or classics can trip you up. Hua Cheng smiled too. Is there anything else Gerger wants to know? I'll tell you everything, if it's within my knowledge. Pei Ming sat in front of them and didn't try to chat with the Rainmaster, so he was listening in on them. Indeed, Lord Ghost King, Your Highness, why don't you ask about Crimson Rain Sword Flower's background? See if he'll answer you. Shilian's smile faltered. To inquire after the background of a Ghost King was quite rude. To raise an inappropriate example, in Shilian's mind, this kind of personal secret was no different than asking for the size of a man's manhood. He instantly changed the subject. General Pei. What? Pei Ming asked. There's bumps up ahead. Watch out, Shilian exclaimed. What are you talking about? The black ox carrying the 4 of them mooed a long cry as deep as a bell, and Pei Ming was flung off. He was stupefied. What the heck? This was truly never heard of, nor seen. Flinging aside, mistakes happen after all. But why not fling off the one at the front or the back? And it just had to be the one in the middle? Was that even possible? The ox never paused in its step. Kiln looked back from ahead, his hollows trailing back. Didn't I say that there were bumps ahead and to watch out, General Pei? Throughout the entire journey, Pei Ming was flung off 7 to 8 times. The 4, riding the Rainmaster's guardian steed, finally arrived at the foot of the Kiln's mountain. The Kiln used to be a lusciously green mountain sitting in the heart of the royal capital. Its scenery was beautiful and elegant, much like Mount Taesang. At its foot was the majestic royal capital, the most prosperous imperial city. This imperial city used to be buried deep underground, but it probably resurfaced after going through many earthquakes, emerging back above ground. Kiln sat on the black ox and his eyes roamed the surroundings for a moment. He was about to dismount when he saw Hua Cheng was standing there with his hand out toward him. Kiln's heart skipped a beat and he gave him his hand before hopping down. There must be a divine temple here in the imperial city too, right? There certainly is, Hua Cheng replied. Although Pei Ming fell 7 to 8 times during the ride, as expected of a martial god, he was very sturdy, and when he walked, he didn't limp even once. He reached out to pat the ox's neck. He piped up. The tallest building in the city must either be the palace or the divine temple, I'm guessing. Hua Cheng replied, No, the Wuyang temple in the imperial city is on top of the mountain. He pointed. Sure enough, halfway up the deep crimson mountain, there was a corner of an eave peeking out, but the majority of the building itself was hiding behind the misty red shadow. Kiln wondered, why is that mountain red? But he didn't get to finish his question before suddenly the ox roared and threw back its head. They were already moving ahead, but startled, they looked back. That ox was already rolling on the ground, and the rope that was tightly gripped in the Rainmaster's hand never loosened. What's going on? That ox let out a human scream. Ah! Kiln was further away and hadn't seen clearly what was happening, but he did see the Rainmaster, who upon hearing that cry pulled out Yulong and struck down toward the black ox. The shine of the blade flashed, and something black and furry was flung away, crashing against a wall on the street, splashing a large, astringent red flower. It was a corpse-eating rat. What screamed earlier wasn't that black ox, but the corpse-eating rat, who had climbed onto the ox when no one was looking and bit into it. Although the rat was at the brink of death, it was still screaming. Your Royal Highness, Your Highness, Your Highness, Your Highness. Save me, save me, save me. There was a loud boom. Kiln's heart lurched, his ears ringing. Hua Cheng instantly pulled him behind his person, raised his hand, and that corpse-eating rat was instantly blown into a ball of misty blood. Yet the little eyes, still stuck on the wall, were still shimmering in madness. Lord Rainmaster, I suggest you check over your steed, Hua Cheng said. Rainmaster felt and turned over the black ox's hair and said, It's just a scratch. However, there were more and more human voices rising from all around. Cough, cough, cough. Take me away. Take me away. I should have fled a long time ago. We shouldn't have believed his nonsense. What a wrongful death. Gurgur, Gurgur, Your Highness. That last line was particularly clear, and it was Hua Cheng's voice. Only then did Kiln snap out of it. Sorry. Hua Cheng looked serious. Did you understand what they were saying again? Kiln nodded. Hua Cheng reached out and covered his ears. Don't listen to them. Those words weren't directed at you. I know, Tian said. Thousands upon thousands of corpse-eating rats came swarming toward the four of them, pouring in like black tide. This was the imperial city, the population much denser than the city before, which meant that there were more deceased, providing a more abundant meal for the rats. Thus their numbers were quite impressive. They were being heavily surrounded. Pei-Ming was growing serious, and a thin layer of protection aura covered him. You all leave first. I'll lead them away. Yet unexpectedly, before he finished, that large ocean-like flock of rats screeched and dashed in a particular direction. They were running toward the Rainmaster. Before anyone had noticed, the Rainmaster had already remounted her black ox and was running away in the opposite direction. That ox had already made a distance of some tens of meters away, but it wasn't going too fast. It was fast enough that the corpse-eating rats couldn't keep up, but slow enough that the rats still kept her in sight, keeping the perfect distance to lead them away without them catching up. Yushi Huang called out from the distance, "My lords, please go forth on your way. I can lead them away." As the Rainmaster moved, riding her ox, she scattered full and white grains of rice along the way. Rats loved rice by nature, after all, and who knew how many years it had been since they last saw such full and white grains, so they rushed after her. What Pei-Ming had wanted to do was stolen by the Rainmaster, and his expression was conflicted. Ho Chang dropped his hands and said, "Go, let's go." When Shilin heard the voices of those corpse-eating rats, his head would throb. So when the voices were gone, he let out a breath of relief and nodded. However, Pei-Ming turned to them. "You're going to leave just like that?" "Yeah," Ho Chang said. Pei-Ming frowned. The Rainmaster can't possibly take care of that on her own. It's crazy to run off like that. Then after some thought, he finally came to a decision. "Your Highness, you both go on first. If I catch up after, then we'll meet up at the Divine Temple." Then he turned around and went off to chase after the Rainmaster. Shilin was perplexed. How come General Pei doesn't think that the Rainmaster can take care of herself? Wasn't the situation just now more obvious that the Rainmaster is more than capable? Ho Chang laughed. He probably can't stand being protected by a woman. Without wasting any time, the two crossed through the imperial city and the innumerous empty-shelled stone people and ran toward that big mountain. They finally set foot on the kiln. The reason why this mountain looked like it was dyed in the color of blood was because the forests on this mountain were all red. They weren't maples, but they were crimson like maples, the color of blood. Shilin could also smell the stench of blood. It seemed the nutrients of the plants here consisted of plenty of resentment and human blood. This fourth Wuyang temple was built halfway up the kiln, the largest of the 4 temples, and in comparison, also the most well-maintained. Within the halls were also many stone people, their poses and expressions all different. The two ran straight for the grand hall, and when they entered, sure enough, there was a mural. However, after Ho Chang swept a look, he said, "It appears someone's come before us." Within the grand hall, there was only one mural. The other two, while the walls themselves were fine, their surfaces were already slashed and destroyed. This was the first time they'd encountered this. Shilin was slightly dumbfounded. Who could have done this? They didn't even know who painted the murals, and now they had to add the mystery of the mural destroyer into the mix. Still, they were short on time, so they studied the mural that was left. With just one glance, not even a close examination, all the hair on Shilian's neck stood up. What is this? This mural was completely different from those of the other 3 temples. However, there was only one person in the painting. The colors were dark, the lines and faces were extremely twisted. The appearance of the person couldn't be discerned at all, only that it was a civilian in tattered clothing. But that was nothing. What made Shilian shrink back in chills was that this person appeared to be in excruciating pain. He had ripped his own clothing and exposed his own flesh. Upon his body were 3 faces, and each one was as contorted as his own. It was a human face disease. Under such a shock, Shilian unconsciously hugged his head and mumbled, "It's the same. It's exactly the same." The Crown Prince of Wuyang had also encountered the human face disease. Why was this person's experience almost exactly the same as his? Hucheng saw how quickly things were going downhill and steadied him. "Your Highness, don't look anymore." After some hesitation, he pulled Shilian over and pressed him into his embrace, the tone of his voice firm but gentle. "All right, Your Highness, listen to me. Listen to me. All the murals before were shown chronologically. The last one had the Crown Prince of Wuyang build a sky bridge, so the next one should have been an event that came right after. But this mural doesn't connect to the last one at all. The timeline doesn't make sense. Isn't that right?" Just now, Shilian was overly shaken by the image of the human face disease. Its shadows too great in his heart, which is why he was petrified. However, he came around quickly and instantly began thinking, "You're right, there must be something missing in between. Someone destroyed the previous 2 murals before we came. Since this person destroyed the other 2 murals, then why didn't they destroy this one too?" Hucheng asked. "Why did they leave just this one? And it just had to be the one of the human face disease." "There are 2 possibilities," Shilian said. First, they might have thought that leaving this mural behind was inconsequential, and it didn't matter if it remained. They were more concerned with us seeing the other 2. "And the second?" Hucheng asked. Shilian said slowly, "This person actually destroyed all 3 murals, and this one was painted on afterward. It's fake." Hucheng replied. "It could very well be that all the murals we've seen along the way are fake. We're already very close to the answer, so before that, don't start overthinking things on your own, all right?" Having been buried in his arms for so long, Shilian finally completely tossed out that mural from his brain. Only then did he notice the position the 2 of them were in, and was about to pull himself away from the hole. "How embarrassing, Sanlang. I got overly agitated just now." However, Hucheng didn't allow him to break away, and instead pulled him in closer, smiling. "Nothing to be embarrassed about, but..." He lowered his head and said, "There's actually a 3rd possibility." The bottom half of Shilian's face was still buried in his shoulder, and Hucheng's voice was right next to his ear. Extremely, extremely soft, and other than Shilian, no one else could hear. Shilian's breath hitched slightly, and he heard Hucheng whisper, "The 3rd possibility is, it wasn't that this person didn't want to destroy all the murals, but they didn't make it in time. Just as they were destroying the other 2, we came in. So now, they're hiding in the Grand Hall this very moment."